it again, baby. It's the NFL DraftCast show with Rick Saratella here, brought to you by AllAccessFootball.com. Our first show since the NFL Draft Bible has been published, distributed to all of our subscribers. Another year in the books. Unbelievable amounts of information, tidbits, intel, scouting reports, rankings, a look ahead to 2026, mock drafts, Hot 100s. I mean, what else you want out of life if you're a draft Nick like me, Rick Saratella, here on this Wednesday, April 16th, 2025, which means we are 8 days away, Yogi Berra days away from the 2025 NFL Draft. Destination Green Bay. Who would have thought when we started this thing 23 years ago, the NFL Draft would be held in Green Bay, Wisconsin? But here we are next year. Steel Curtain City time. It'll be in Pittsburgh. They're already planning and plotting for the festivities out in Pittsburgh. That should be exciting as well. But today, we're going to focus on Destination Green Bay. What's going to unfold here a week from today? Also, second part of the show, we will be joined by Neil Stratton, CEO and founder of Inside the League. If you've been tuned into my podcasts over the past, a couple of decades, then you know Neil has been a frequent guest on the show. And I'm happy to report my copy of Value Picks just came in the mail. So we're going to talk about that. It's his third book. It's a trilogy. Scout Speak, Moving the Chains, and Value Picks. I'm an avid reader of Neil Stratton, and I look forward. I just got it, but not even an hour ago, so I haven't dug in. But you can see there's quotes from Les Snead and John Spytek, George Payton. I'm looking forward to digging in and learning more. And hopefully you're digging in and learning more about the NFL Draft with the NFL Draft Bible, because it's a labor of love. It's different than the other draft guides out there. I think, one, it's written from first person on location reports, right? There's a lot of people putting out draft guides. I don't see them on the scouting trails. I don't see them at the All-Star circuit. I don't see them, quite frankly, ever. But that's what makes us different. We're out there, we're rubbing elbows, we're talking with the scouts, and we're getting a feel for not just the players, but the players' parents, their entourage, their campus, everything, the cafeteria workers. Like we're in the trenches doing the work, and then giving that to you, character reports, medical reports, not just scouting reports. We've got one-liners in there. We've got interviews. I mean, if you're watching the NFL Draft 8 days from today and you don't have the NFL Draft Bible in front of you, what are we really doing? Because it really is the most educational draft guide. It's not watered down fluff. This is the real deal, folks. And I can guarantee you it's the most accurate draft guide over the last 23 years, bottom line. And so today, what I want to talk about first is the Joe Schoen press conference, which I watched. And, the people in the tri-state area are not loving Rick Saratella right now. And that's okay, because I have a conviction, something Joe Schoen doesn't. Because he led us to believe that he loved Shedeur Sanders. He was out there in Boulder during the regular season. He was out there at the East-West Shrine Bowl, courting him with 20 to 30 other personnel, and they were all in on Shedeur Sanders. Now, these press conferences, these media gatherings, the GMs come out and put their poker face on, right? So you're trying to read the tea leaves. You're trying to read the body language. You're trying to read in between the coach speak and all the, talk about saying a whole lot of nothing, right? Saying something without saying a whole lot of nothing. Joe Schoen went up there and basically said, we're not in a position that we've put ourselves, that we've mandatory got to draft a quarterback. Well, you did not pay Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston as if they were starting quarterbacks. But then you come out here in front of the assembled media and tell them that you have established quarterbacks, but you didn't pay them that way. Jameis Winston is making a measly $4 million. Give me a break. That's peanuts. And then, Russell Wilson is getting 10.5 There's mediocre quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins making $40 million a year. I'd hate to break it to you. So they did not pay a Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston as if they were starters. But if the Giants don't draft Shedeur Sanders, I don't understand what their vision is, what their philosophy is. Some of the other things Shane had to say was like, the value has to be right. You got to get it right. I disagree. I disagree because since the new CBA has come around, you can move on very quickly if a quarterback doesn't pan out. We've seen it with Josh Rosen, right? We've seen it with some other quarterbacks recently. They just move on because you're not financially obligated to pay big bucks if a first. It's not Jamarcus Russell era where selecting a wrong quarterback sets you back 5 to 10 years. No, you move on and you go get a quarterback the next year. In 4 drafts, this is a 4th draft. Joe Schoen has yet to select a quarterback because he believed in Daniel Jones. He paid him that way, $40 million a year, remember? So if you don't take Shedeur Sanders at 3, and please chime on in. I'd love to hear the comments and the feedback. But if you're not taking a quarterback at 3, then what are we really doing here? Because you're not going to win with Russell Wilson. And then, listen, I love the guys on Giants.com. They're like brothers to me. But, I tuned in after the press conference and listened to themselves try to talk themselves into that Russell Wilson's a good quarterback. Well, hey, I know it was a playoff team, but he was 6-5 as a starter. He can still win games in the National Football League. Like, yeah, I mean, Justin Fields had that team revved up, rare and ready to go. What were they, like 4-1, 5-1 when Russ took over? He's a mediocre quarterback. So why not go and get a quarterback who can play and give the fan base hope, give the organization hope, give the front office hope? Because I don't see people going to bed with Vince Lombardi aspirations as with Russell Wilson at the helm. Man, and I'll tell you, like, I was convinced the Giants are all in on Shedeur, but then, like, when he was talking about Abdul Carter Jr., he really couldn't hold back the grin. And that's what I mean. Like, everything he said up there was hogwash. But when he started grinning, trying to hold back that smile, talking about Abdul Carter Jr., I said, you know what? Maybe this guy just has no plan. Because his plan the whole time was Shedeur Sanders. And, you listen to the mainstream media, it makes me sick. It's the same old narrative, same old groupthink box. All of a sudden, like, I had Shedeur Sanders atop our quarterback rankings when he was at Jackson State, and so did many others. And he's been bandied about as a first-round signal caller for the last 2 or 3 years. Now, all of a sudden, you click on ESPN or NFL Network, Shedeur Sanders forgot how to play football all of a sudden the last 2 or 3 weeks. Like, it's unbelievable. Okay? So, last final thoughts on the Giants press conferences. Like, Shane said there was some discrepancies in the room and that they met with the scouts first and then the coaches afterwards. And that tells me, and I don't know this for a fact, but I have heard others talk about it, so I'm not the first to allude to it, that maybe there's a schism there in the front office. Maybe there's a schism there between Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, because I know that Daboll is very high on Shedeur Sanders, as is Mike Tomlin. Right? And so let's transition right there with the first round quarterback conversation, because I think there's going to be at least 3, if not 4 quarterbacks in the first round. How about that? So Shedeur, I'm going to put it at a 50-50 chance right now that Shedeur Sanders goes to the Giants. If not, okay, I think the Steelers are in play for Shedeur Sanders. And looking at the Saints at 9, you would think, like, the way their offense is structured, with Carr intact, Like Jackson Dart would make a lot more sense at 9 for the Saints in terms of their scheme and fit with Kellen Moore. I think Dart would be the better fit. So I could see Dart go at 9. So there's a possibility, there's a scenario out there, like if the Giants go Carter, then Jackson Dart could go ahead of Shedeur Sanders. Now, the Steelers are at 21. Would somebody jump them to get in front of Pittsburgh for Shedeur? You got Cleveland. You've got a couple other teams out there sniffing around quarterbacks. The Rams have been meeting with quarterbacks. I don't think the Rams would trade up, but I do believe the Browns have the 40th overall pick, and maybe they move ahead of Pittsburgh for Shedeur Sanders. But if Shedeur goes at 3 and Jackson Dart goes at 9, then there's another scenario floating around where Jalen Milroe could go 21 to Pittsburgh. Now, he's got the invite to Green Bay. Usually those invitations are reserved for first-round dudes. Usually, right? So could you see Shedeur at 3, Dart at 9, Milroe at 22 would give you 4 quarterbacks. The over-under in Vegas right now is 2.5. I think it's over all day. It's a supply and demand league in the National Football League. The common denominator amongst quality teams or playoff teams is a good quarterback. A lot of teams need one. Cleveland, Giants, Steelers, Browns. I mean, so, and I think we're getting some clarity, like outside of the quarterbacks. I think we're getting clarity at some of these other selections. We've got Neil Stratton coming up at the top of the hour. Okay. But some of the other selections, like Cam Ward's 1. I believe it's Travis Hunter at 2. If you guys hear otherwise, let me know. And again, we're streaming here on the X at NFL Draft Bible. Go to allaccessfootball.com. Go get yourself a copy of that NFL Draft Bible, 500 scouting reports. We've got intel for days, okay? And number 3 is a 50-50 shot. It's Shedeur or Abdul Carter. If they go Shedeur, then Abdul Carter suddenly goes and falls into the laps of the New England Patriots. If they go Carter, well, then Will Campbell will be the pick at 4 for New England. So you got Cam Ward 1, Travis Hunter 2. There's 2 names really in consideration for 3. You got Shedeur Sanders or Abdul Carter Jr. You got 2 names in consideration for number 4. You've got Abdul Carter Jr. and you have Will Campbell. At 5, it's going to be a defensive lineman from what I understand in Jacksonville. Sounds like Mason Graham. Could be Jalen Walker. Jalen Walker is a wild card at the top 10. Okay. So Mason Graham or Jalen Walker are pretty much the 2 options at 5 for Jacksonville. I think Ashton Jeanty is going to go number 6 to the Raiders. Maybe not. Maybe not. We'll see. I would have it Cam Ward, Hunter, Shedeur, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Ashton Jeanty. Then at 7, right? Who do we got at 7? The Jets. Is the Jets at 7? Yes. Jets are 7 or 8. Let me see. Let me get the draft picks up here. The Jets, I think, are down to 2 picks. It could be Armin Membo. 7. Yeah, it could be Armin Membo or it could be Tyler Warren. And I would go Tyler Warren. Right? Yeah, Jets at 7, Panthers 8, Saints at 9. So I think the Jets are between Armand Membo or Tyler Warren. Now, if New England goes Carter, there's a possibility the Jets could have a choice between Campbell or Membo. But if it was me, I'd go Tyler Warren. I know our guy Brian Baldinger, who was recently up in Florham Park at the Jets facility, says he thinks the Jets are leaning towards a weapon. And I think it's a little bit too rich for any of these wide receivers. Emeka Egbuka is my number 1 for whatever that's worth. I wouldn't take him in the top 10. but I think the Jets are looking at Tyler Warren or Armand Membu. I do believe the Panthers are going to take a Georgia pass rusher. If Jalen Walker is still on the board, or his counterpart, Michael Williams, I think will be in play for Carolina at 8, which brings us to the Saints at 9. I think with the current Carr situation, it has to be a quarterback. So it's going to be, I believe, Jackson Dart, as crazy as it sounds. I think Jackson Dart is going 9 to the Saints. So we have somewhat of a clarity. And then really, like, once you get to 10 and 11, Chicago and San Francisco, you can go any which way, right? Chicago has done a great job building inside the trenches. I think they built it up on the interior. Maybe they go offensive tackle as well. But I'll tell you what, we got a couple minutes to play around with. I'm looking forward to having Neil Stratton on. It's been a while since I got a chance to speak to him on air. We did the All-Star game trails. I'm going to be recording a show with my guy Dave Del Cole after this. I don't know when it's going to air. I would imagine it's going to air at some point this week. But he used to do a show with Dave T. Thomas. And when he reached out to me and he said that, it caught my attention. Because Dave T. Thomas, I grew up on that. I mean, Dave T. Thomas is as good as it gets, better than Mel Kiper. And if maybe I'm showing my age, I'm 45 years old. I grew up on Dave T. Thomas, and his segments on the Chet Kopic show, based out of Chicago, were must-see TV. And really, some of the trailblazers and pioneers of the draft industry, like Howard Balzer and Joel Buchsbaum and Dave T. Thomas, like, I don't think they get enough credit. And, like I saw Mel Kiper Jr., they're doing this crossbreed promotion, NFL Network analyst, ESPN analyst. It's like they asked Mel Kiper like how he got his break. He didn't even pay homage to Howard Balzer, who did the first 2 NFL drafts. And then Mel got a call, like Howard couldn't do the third one. He had to go to his son's birth or something, I think. And it was in the Hilton hotel lobby, so it wasn't a big deal. And this kid out of college, Mel Kiper Jr., was born. That's how that happened. But in case you were wondering, Dave T. Thomas really, I think, paved the way for Mel Kiper Jr. And so, like, I'm looking forward to the Scouts Honor podcast with Dave Del Cole. That's going to be recorded later today. And I was hoping to get to some of my day 3 value picks today on the show. I got a whole list, laundry list of them. But I won't be able to talk to them about them today. But they're going to be on the Scouts Honor podcast. So go to allaccessfootball.com. Make sure you subscribe for the largest independent newsletter on the universe. And also, while you're there, subscribe to the All Access Football Plus premium package. You get the NFL Draft Bible download. You also get access to all of our scouting seminars. We've got Baldy Breakdown, NFL Draft film breakdowns right there that you'll unlock and gain access to all the archives. So it's the best deal, really, out there. If you're looking for a draft guide that's informative, that's accurate, that's deep, we've got all the verified measurements in there and all of our scouting reports from not just the season and the campus visits, but also the All-Star game circuit. We were out at the Tropical Bowl and the Hula Bowl and the East-West Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl. And so we've got all the combine numbers in there, pro day numbers. Like, you can't go wrong. And shout out to the NFL Draft Bible Familia, all our hardworking staff. But we're up against, shout out to Cole Glotzer behind the glass, the super producer of the show. He's going to take us to a commercial break. When we come back, Neil Stratton of Inside the League, author of Value Picks, will join us next. Buckle up, everybody. Hey, Rick Saratella checking in from the birthplace of college football here at Rutgers Pro Day. Drill's still underway, but I had to just hop on and tell you about Dymere Miller, the transfer wide receiver out of Monmouth. If you've been following us the last couple years, I've been telling you about Dymere Miller at 5'11", 190 pounds, tough after the catch. He just ran a 4.32 and a 4.34 40-yard dash on my watch. 4.32, 4.34. I'm curious to see what the official times are going to be, but the whole practice bubble here was oohing and ahhing. Very impressive from Dymere Miller, who also added a 34-inch vertical jump. Some other guys, Tyreen Powell, who did not work out at the combine, had him in the 4.85, 4.90 range on the 40-yard dash. Did not work out in other drills. Kyle Monangai sat on most of his 40 times, or he did settle on his combine times, had a 10.5 broad jump. And Robert Longerbeam, another combine invite here, stood on his combine times. We're keeping an eye on Keontae Hamilton, a guy that really stood out at the Hula Bowl, got the call up to the East-West Shrine Bowl, looks the part, short arms, great technique. So a couple guys there here at the Rutgers Pro Day. Of course, we'll have more in the 2025 NFL Draft Bible over at allaccessfootball.com. Hey, what a great day, everybody. RIC in the place to be, checking in from the Jersey Shore. Look, we got people on the beach, hanging out. We're back at it again. We can't stop. We won't stop. I had to come out here and make sure the ocean's still wet. It's been a long, hard winter. And just wanted to let you all know the 2025 NFL Draft Bible came out today. So it's been a long, arduous journey. It's in the books, baby. I hope you go and check it out. Shout out to Lauren Davidoff and Dominic Ambrose, Jarrett Regal, Sam Teets, everybody, Cole Glotzer, everybody who contributed to the Draft Bible, man. What an accomplishment. But hey, go check it out over at allaccessfootball.com. The media blitz is going to be on for the next 2 weeks or so, counting you down. And I got some really cool announcements for everybody, so keep it locked. Thanks for the support. Back at it again, Rick Serritella here, RIC in the place to be, checking in from the Jersey Shore, and you saw it. The NFL Draft Bible is out now. Go to allaccessfootball.com. Get down on it. Boop! We've already flipped the page in the calendar over to 2026. You can find the top 10 rankings by position for the next year's draft class in that Draft Bible edition. It's on sale now. It's part of the All Access Football experience. You subscribe, you get access to the scouting seminars and all of our premium content, Baldy breakdowns, film seminars, the film breakdowns, the draft prospects, the draft guide, everything you could possibly want. And we have a lot of intel coming on the 2026 positional breakdowns coming out on the website throughout the course of the summer. So keep on the lookout for that. As I alluded to earlier in the show, I received my copy of Value Picks. But before I introduce my next guest, I want to just point out that if you go to Amazon, you can bundle up and save. What's that commercial? Fumblerooski. Because our next guest is the founder and CEO of Inside the League, the only consulting service exclusively for NFL scouting, college personnel, and NFL agents. Also, I'm proud to say a good friend of mine, but I'm an avid reader of Neil Stratton. His first book, Moving the Chains, is basically a step-by-step guide on how to navigate the draft process. If you're an aspiring prospect, an agent, a parent, I recommend you definitely go and cop that. His second book, Scout Speak, it was so good. I read it twice. Very easy to read. He puts the scouting terms in layman's verbiage, right? So even if you're not a scout, even if you don't know the football terminology, Neil breaks it down with tales from the scouting trails, including various scouts. And now for his next book in the trilogy, I feel like we're getting to a Star Wars sequel here. He's got Value Picks, the drama, decisions, and details behind 8 selections in the 2016 NFL Draft, which was 10 years ago, believe it or not. I remember it because this was the first year that they moved the draft from New York City, and it was in Chicago, and nobody knew, none of the security knew where to send me. They sent me in like 5 wrong spots before I finally got settled in. And as I sat down, I remember flipping on my laptop, going to Twitter, and the first thing I saw was Laramie Tunsil with the gas mask bong going on. That was the 2016 NFL Draft. And we're going to welcome in our guest, Neil Stratton, right now to the show. Good to see you, Neil. How are you, my friend?
What is up, brother? It's good to ride again with my Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl.
My road dog.
That's right. Road Dogs is right. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be on, man. I'm excited to talk a little bit about the book, and thanks for picking that up too.
Yeah, man. I just got it, so I have not dug into it except for the awesome acknowledgments that you put at the end, which is my favorite part, because I know the hard work that goes into putting out a book. And you've got testimonials here from George Payton, John Spytek, and Les Snead, all kinds of NFL general managers. I know when I was on the road with you, you were telling me about it because you were kind of up against it, trying to get it out for this year's draft, the 10-year anniversary. But you had 100 interviews compiled for this book. So my first question for you, Neil, is what I'm looking most forward to when I read the value picks is what I'm going to learn from the scouting lessons, right? The hits, the misses, the thought process. And I know you've posted on your blog, Succeed in Football, some of the things that you've learned, but share with our listening audience the valuable lessons that you took away from writing this book.
Yeah, there's a lot of vagaries to the scouting process, obviously, and I think it's such a made-for-TV event, the NFL draft is, that we all kind of get caught up in it. We all follow along. We've all seen the players, but until you make the scouting visits, until you make the picks, until you do all those kind of things that scouts do, and in many cases you do, Rick, because you're a lot more aggressive about this than a lot of people that are just kind of doing this from behind a computer screen. But until you're really out there on the road learning, and until you make, more importantly, until you make the picks and fail with the picks sometimes and learn the lessons the hard way, I think it's really hard to fully grasp the challenge that an NFL team faces in trying to restock its roster with its seven picks that they typically have. So I think that was a big part of it. Obviously, character. The funny, I'll tell you the other thing, I guess, the nutshell takeaway from this is scouts are usually right. Now we get really wrapped up in, oh, how'd they miss on this player? How did they miss on that player? But more often than not, they knew the ups and downs of every player. They knew their character, the risks that they were taking with their character. They knew they were fast. They knew they were tough. They knew a lot of things, but there are a lot of variables that happen once you get to the league. How is the player developed? What kind of injuries does he have? Who's he got ahead of him? Who else is in the locker room that's having an influence on him? And maybe most importantly, how many systems does he have to play in, especially when it comes to quarterback, before he really gets some stability and really gets his feet under him. So there are a lot of different reasons why players fail, and it's not usually because the team was just dead wrong on him. It usually was because there are a number of considerations that are impossible to predict on draft day. And so it's fun to hear this guy's can't miss or this guy is a sleeper or whatever, but we don't really know, obviously, until we take all that into consideration. And I think that's one of the things we try to capture in the book.
Yeah, that's the one thing that just stood out to me when you were talking is like the quarterback hit rate miss ratio. Like a lot of it does have to do with circumstance and system and schemes and like and I just, like as you're talking, I'm thinking about Jason Campbell, 7 different offenses the first 7 years. Caleb Williams now. I just did a write-up. He's entering his second season with his 3rd play caller. Mm-hmm. Not exactly the type of blueprint you draw up when you draft a franchise quarterback. And I just spent probably the first 10 minutes of my show talking about Shedeur Sanders and the dilemma the Giants are in at number 3. Is it best player available or is it quarterback? And in this year, in 2016, you had the Carson Wentz, Jared Goff debate at 1 and 2. They went 1 and 2. And what can you share with us in terms of stories or lessons that you learned with that kind of debate? Because we've had Leaf and Manning. We've had, who was it? Heath Schuler and Trent Dilfer, right? And then we had Carson Wentz and Jared Goff.
So many. Yeah. The interesting thing about that year was that the Eagles pretty much were sold on Carson Wentz at the Senior Bowl. They went in. He had a very impressive interview session with him. They kept him longer than they were expecting to. He really kind of won him over. And then as they proceeded through the rest of the draft season and kind of his workouts and all those kind of things, that just cemented things. That's at the point where they really wanted to, hey, let's go up and get the, let's get him because we have to get him. He's a guy that we can't miss on. Goff, I think, was a bit more of an acquired taste for the Rams. And there certainly were a lot of teams that really weren't sure which ones they liked. Some didn't see either one of them as first rounders. Some of them really were sold on. For example, the Bills, when it came to Jared Goff, they didn't see him as the big, thick Jim Kelly type guy that could stand in the winds and the snow and all the elements and throw it, to throw it where he needed to into that kind of window. Wentz was a little kind of maybe spacey with a couple teams when it came to the interviews. They weren't sure he had the stuff that it took to really become a leader and the kind of guy that could grasp the playbook quickly and develop as quickly as they needed him to. The odd thing is that both players were really they both met with pretty instant success, relatively speaking. It's just that Goff, I think I would argue, got into a better system, obviously with a very talented offensive coordinator who's now the head coach of the Bears, and got behind a better line with a better running game. And that made all those things come together for him and come to fruition and kind of rebuilt his career. Wentz, I think the story, and again, going back to all the things you can't predict on draft day, really had the nagging injuries, the back things, the knee things, all those kind of conspired to hurt him. And then, of course, Doug Peterson wasn't around as long. And so a number of things certainly let's just say there are a lot of things to overcome for Carson Wentz. And maybe that's why he hasn't met with the same success that Jared Goff has.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I remember being at the combine and talking to Carson Wentz one-on-one, actually. And I went up to him. I said, listen, young man, I said, you need to learn how to slide, because he didn't know how.
Yeah.
And all of his injuries in college were head first. And then even in the pros, like his first couple of years, he was still diving head first. I said, you need to learn how to slide. True. You're not going to survive. It's funny. Here we are 10 years later. He's retired. And Jared Goff is still kicking. But the funny thing is, Wentz got the Super Bowl ring, right?
Well, that's true. That's true. Now, he was kind of riding the pine he was hurt when that happened. But he did get the ring. You're right. Nick Foles gets a lot of the credit there. But no, certainly. And he's a big target, too. He's a big, thick guy. Kind of easy to find when you're coming up from safety or linebacker to take a piece of him. So, yeah, there are a number of factors like that you can't predict. Now, oddly enough, and shifting gears a little bit, there's a perception that Derrick Henry was going to have the same problem. Again, more of an upright running style, more of a guy that, a between the tackles type runner. They weren't sure if he'd be able to handle it. The Bills thought his legs weren't thick enough. They felt like he kind of ran on pins and he wasn't going to be the kind of guy that could just maul people, a Jerome Bettis type person. 10 years later, we know that wasn't right. So there's a lot of things that go into this. Obviously, teams are going out and they're doing the work, but it's just such an imprecise kind of science that, we sit here and we shake our heads sometimes and think, how could you have thought that? And those are the things that are in the pages of value picks that, man, why was there ever a perception that this guy was like this or this guy was like that? And I think that's what makes it kind of fun.
Talking to Neil Stratton of InsideTheLeague.com. His new book, Value Picks, is available now on Amazon.com. And it's funny, Neil, like round 2, pick number 45, Derrick Henry. And I remember the silly nonsense we were spewing about, he runs upright. Like, it's so silly now to sit here and think that this man-child wasn't going to be. Not only did every NFL team pass up on him, but 45 means that half the league passed up on him twice, which is so silly to think about 10 years later, right?
Well, here's the funny thing. We had John Robinson, who was a GM, first-year GM back then, on a Zoom last night with him, and he was lamenting the fact, they had 3 second-rounders. Henry was the third one. So they weren't – even John said, listen, I don't really deserve a lot of credit.
He passed on him 3 times.
I asked him twice to take other players that wound up not working out. So it is funny how teams just missed, despite all the work they do and everything they have access to. It's still something, kind of to some degree where they're throwing darts.
No, I think there should be a book written about every draft after the 10-year period, because you can really gauge and figure out like who hit, who missed. And like, there were some players here. I like the variety of players that you selected, by the way, because there was some character concerns here. And we mentioned Goff and Wentz, but I remember that year, like Dak Prescott had like 1 or 2 DUIs. He got into this nasty parking lot brawl. I remember he got his whole face gashed open in a parking lot brawl, and he did slide. He was actually the 135th pick in the 4th round. Unbelievable when you think about it.
It is unbelievable. Now, there were concerns about his accuracy, and I think even 10 years ago, teams weren't looking for a guy that was maybe as mobile, and they saw him kind of as a run pass guy, maybe not as refined as a passer. But I do think that having a DUI the weekend before his pro day, literally in Starkville, when he went back home and maybe had a few pops with his buddies or whatever, really did hurt him. I think also the fact that he had that brawl kind of situation on the beach, and there were a couple of scouts that said, "Hey, listen, I think you're a thug," and really got in his kitchen about it. To Dak's credit, he fought back, stood up for himself, and I think sold himself. There are a lot of teams that I talked to that said, hey, man, we were thinking maybe third, and then we passed on him, and then we thought maybe fourth, and the Cowboys jumped before we could. So it's not like people had taken him off their board by any stretch of the imagination. They just didn't realize, I think, his leadership qualities. I think that's what kind of sets him apart. I think even now you see the team kind of rallies around him, and obviously they've struggled a little bit of late, but I think a healthy Dak is a player that's going to at least give you a chance. It puts you in the conversation for the playoffs and maybe beyond that. And I don't think teams are able to recognize that. Also, I think to his credit, he has improved his accuracy. It wasn't that long ago when there's this conception, I guess, a belief among scouts that if your accuracy was bad coming to the draft, it was going to stay bad. I think Josh Allen has gotten a lot of credit for changing the minds of scouts, but I think Dak has played a big role in that as well. So it's hard to look down and forecast that kind of thing. And so I'm not going to beat up on scouts and evaluators for that. But to Dak's credit, he's really turned himself into a big-time player, and it's shown in the contracts he's signed and the success he's had.
I mean, you can't ask for more out of a 4th round pick than what you get out of Dak Prescott. And, shout out to Will McClay, who's been there for quite some time, because he also found Tony Romo late in the draft too. So Dallas with some success there finding late round quarterbacks. But Dak Prescott was not the only prospect in this draft that had some character concerns, because I don't know how many times that Tyreek video was played leading up to the draft, and he fell all the way down to the 5th round and the 165 overall selection.
Yeah, and to hear Bus Cook tell it, Bus was his agent then, if the Chiefs hadn't taken him, he may become a UDFA. He was a guy that he was able to kind of, I think John Dorsey really was the one who maybe didn't stay on the table for him, because John was the GM back then, so he didn't have to do something like that. But he certainly was a guy who kind of caught his eye, went to bat for him, saw things in him, and was willing to maybe do a little more digging than other teams and not just kind of blanch at the initial issues. Now, I have heard talk from other scouts saying, hey, it wasn't just what happened to Oklahoma State that was in his background, but the fact is he cleaned things up at least for his first few years. Now, I think where scouts deserve credit is ultimately, yes, he kind of has become, again, I'm not trying to throw shade on him in that way, that he's not some guy who's just going out and beating up women all the time, but he certainly has had his off-field issues. It's been pretty bumpy for him, both in Kansas City and in Miami. And I guess, you would say that they are accurate there. I would extend that to Michael Thomas as well. I mean, when everyone went to Columbus, the constant refrain was, this guy outworks everyone. He's very intense about that. Okay, that's true. But they also said he's got a little prima donna in him, and he's a little unpredictable and kind of wants things his way. Not always a guy that's going to accept hard coaching. Once again, I think they were pretty much right across the board on all the things that they'd heard in Columbus, and that I think that's been was repeated in New Orleans. And oddly enough, he was the first guy out of the league. And I think you can pin that on his off the field stuff and what he did, with the Saints, that kind of came out as far as the fights and kind of the way he was antagonistic towards Drew Brees and a number of other issues that kind of came back to haunt him. And I think despite the fact he did take a lot of punishment, was a very physical receiver and all those kind of things, and had begun to deteriorate. The fact is, he's just not, there's a perception, real or unreal, that he was not a good clubhouse guy. And I think that's probably what has kept him out of the league.
Yeah, well, we heard him basically give up on the team a couple years ago when they were out of contention. So fascinating information from Neil Stratton. Go pick up Value Picks on Amazon.com. It's out now, the 10-year anniversary of the 2016 NFL Draft. The drama, decisions, and details behind 8 selections in the draft, and none more infamous than Laramie Tunsil. I mean, this is like one of the most infamous picks of all time because, as I stated, like I was just settling into my seat. I was late to the draft. I flick on Twitter. I said, I literally hit refresh on my browser because I thought I was not seeing this. Like,
Yeah. It's the
take
where
us
were
through
you
what you
moment.
learned.
It's the where were you moment for NFL draft fans. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, who can forget something like that happening? And that's one of the fun parts of the book as well. It's one of one of the longest chapters is going team by team. Why didn't they take Tunsil? Oh, they had a need. They didn't take. They took someone else. Oh well, who was trying to move up? Not many. Most of them were petrified that this was the tip of the iceberg. They had missed something terribly, and they just were afraid. Even though we're talking about a blue chip player who's been a lasting talent in the league, obviously. And
There was talk he could go number 1 overall leading up to the
right.
draft. He
People
was
forget
talked
about
about
that.
as the number 1 pick.
People forget about that. There
And he
was
went to 13.
Yeah, the NFL Network was broadcasting his pro day and was talking about, hey, how is this guy not going to be the number 1 pick? Of course, that was about a month before everything happened that made things so interesting. But at the same time, yeah, if you're talking about just purely a talented player, he's proven to be the guy that I think a lot of teams thought he would be.
No doubt about it. And I'll never forget that moment because, like, you're right. That's our JFK moment of the NFL draft, Nick.
It's OJ and the
Industry.
White Bronco, man. I mean, it's an unmistakable time that everyone remembers and probably won't ever forget.
You know, the one cool thing, and like I said, I just got it today in the mail, but I was reading the acknowledgments, and the one thing that stood out to me in terms of, like, you never been to a campus visit, you never clocked a 40 at a pro day, but you said something that stood out to me is that you, and I know this firsthand because I've seen it and witnessed it, but the NFL scouting community has embraced you. You're about as well tapped into the community as there is. Explain to the people at home, like, the different various people that you interviewed for this book. I know you spoke to GMs, front office personnel, agents, players. Like, give us over 100 interviews, I believe. I mean, give us a little taste of the samplings here.
Well, Rick, you see it as well. I mean, there are a lot of things that go into getting a player from college to the NFL and then getting him 10 years down the road. And all those people have stories and all those people have insights. You know, I talked to trainers. I talked to Tony Villani, who's one of the best speed trainers out there. I talked to a number of agents who were part of the pre-draft process. And then, of course, a number of scouts. It was kind of funny, you know, when I would go through, I would look at, I talked to a lot of active scouts, but most of the scouts are retired. They're not in the league anymore because they want to protect themselves. They don't want to get in trouble.
Sure.
They typically were a little bit more candid about things as well, and that's what made it really fun. So, I mean, I can't tell you how many hours I spent coursing through and trying to, okay, where was this guy in 2016? Is he still in the league? No. Okay, how am I getting his phone number? Or if I already had his phone number, man, I'm calling him immediately. And so it was fun kind of piecing it all together and getting all the stories. I think one of the most fun parts of the book is the second to last chapter, where it's doing nothing but I talked to, I think, 8 scouts and gave their complete, you know, their own versions of how their team drafted and why they took the picks they did. And Stephen Price of the Vikings, who was with the Vikings now, he's the assistant GM at UCLA now, but he was on the road. He's got some great stories about the Vikings. They took Moritz Boehringer that year. He had a few qualms about taking him in the 5th round, felt like that was kind of forced on them. Mackenzie Alexander, a cornerback out of Clemson, you got to read the stories they had about him. Clemson actually had a party when he left. They were so happy that he got out of their facility and they didn't have to worry about him anymore. And then as soon as he gets to Minnesota, it's just more hijinks, and you got to catch all that stuff too. Stephen also goes on about how he was one of the first guys to see Wentz, and he was terrified because he liked him so much. He was a Blesto guy. He was with one of the combines. I can't remember which one, but he was the one that saw him first, and he's like, man, this guy's great. But he'd gone in there thinking this guy's probably a 7 PFA. He comes away thinking, man, he could be an elite quarterback, but he's terrified to say that because of what had happened with Jimmy Garoppolo the year before when he tried to extend himself. So a lot of kind of, again, behind the scenes, very detailed stories about what happened. And if you love the idea of scouting. If you're fascinated by the draft, if it's something that, if being a scout is something you've considered somewhere along the line, like, almost everybody who's been a fantasy football guy probably has at some point, then I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a really enjoyable read. It's not a real long book. It's 163 pages, start to finish. And just like I always say about my books, there's no big words because I don't know any. All right. So it's going to be easy for people to read. And I think it does lend itself to 2 reads. You get on a plane, you can probably finish it 2 or 3 hours or whatever, and feel like these players a lot more, and even more so, the job that scouts are doing and what makes them tick, and kind of gives you a better idea, and to me, a better respect for the jobs that scouts do.
Well, I know it's going to be well written. Like I said, your last book, Scout Speak, I did go back and read twice because I went through it and it was an easy read, but then I picked up a lot of stuff the second time around that I didn't pick up on the first time. So go to Amazon.com. The book is called Value Picks. It is the drama, decisions, and details behind 8 selections of the 2016 NFL Draft. I can't believe it's 10 years ago. It feels like yesterday.
Can't either.
It's unbelievable. And while you're on Amazon, do the Fumble Rooski and bundle up. Go get Scout Speak. Go get Moving the Chains. Go get Value Picks. And what do you want to say as a parting shot on the way out the door here today, Neil Stratton? I appreciate your time here.
Well, you know what? I'm easy to find. I'm on Twitter. All that information is there. And listen, I'm looking for ideas on my next one. It took me about 5 years to write that one, and I'm not really sure what direction I want to go. But if you have ideas, chime in about the book. If you pick it up, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like. I think it's a really fun behind the scenes book, and I always wonder why there weren't more books like this out there. So I guess I decided, hey, maybe I should go out and write one. And I really like the way it came out. It was a lot of work. It's always more fun to have written than to actually write. But this one was fun to put together. It was the first one. My last one had a lot of kind of transcriptions of interviews I've done in the past and events and what have you. This one was narrative all the way through. And so it's a lot of good stories. I think a lot of things that really humanize scouts and humanizes the players as well, and kind of gives you an idea on why they made the picks then. And I think we'll give you more insight on why they make the picks in about a week and a half too.
Well, like I said, I'm looking forward to it. My copy just arrived today. I'm excited. Go to InsideTheLeague.com as well. The only consulting service exclusively for NFL scouting, college personnel, NFL agents. Neil Stratton, he's been doing this as long as I have. We're getting old here in this industry, Neil, but I know one thing, we'll be chatting sooner rather than later, my friend. And I wish this to you off the air. I know we'll talk, or I wish this to you on the air. I know we'll talk off the air, but happy drafting, my brother.
Same to you, man. It's like Christmas, right?
Absolutely. There he is. There he goes. Neil Stratton, InsideTheLeague.com, CEO and founder. I was Rick Saratella for another edition of the NFL DraftCast. Please go to allaccessfootball.com. Go get the NFL Draft Bible. Subscribe to All Access Football. You get access to the scouting seminars, Baldy breakdowns, a premium content, our 2026 intel that's coming up. It's going to be banging and bopping. We don't stop. Year-round coverage of the NFL Draft and everything football. We'll also be having our top 10 prospect watch list for the Canadian Football League that's starting up in a couple months. We've got the UFL, United Football League, is entering week 4. The Indoor Football League, I've been keeping tabs. I'm a sick mojo. I love it all. And we're going to have scouting reports on all these guys, just like we did the NFL Draft Bible. And appreciate Cole Glotzer for another great episode in the books. Man, what a great show. If you're just tuning in, this will be available on YouTube. Of course, if you're streaming in on Twitter, please tell a friend, share, like, subscribe, do your job, right? I did my job this last hour of power. Do your job as a loyal listener. Subscribe, hit like, share. We need the algorithm love, It's all about the algorithm these days. By the way, I will have some programming alerts for the upcoming draft week, 8 days away. So keep it locked. And much love to everybody who tuned in to the show today. And we'll see you next time, everybody.